Welcome to The Good Ride. I'm James Beastie, and I'm just being me in a world that isn't. Today, we're going to talk about the Lib-Rig, which is a combination of the old Bird, BRD, and the Dynamo. So I got this only one day at the demos. It's not ideal, but lately Mervin, aka Lib-Tech, GNU, Bent Metal, hasn't had the resources they've had in the past to get me demos. They're the only one in the industry who doesn't. So I did the best I could with the time I had. On a good note, I did compare it, same day, same boots, same bindings, same runs with the GNU Antigravity and the Lib-Tech Dynamo. So that was really cool to see how this fit on the spectrum and how it compares to the old BRD that it replaced, or the Bird, call it whatever you want. This 59 that I tested fit me just right. I wouldn't want to go smaller and I wouldn't want to go bigger. Now, a few things that might make you want to swipe right. This has great pop as usual. It has good grip. It has a very dynamic, more centered personality versus the Bird. It's got a lot more dynamo in it than it used to. Now, some things that might make you want to swipe left. If you liked the Bird, you like that tapered, directional feel that's set back a little bit more, you're not going to like this as much. As usual, the bass is kind of slow, takes a lot of maintenance, and that's about it. So let's talk shape. This has much more of that Dynamo anti-gravity personality now. Even though it has more setback on side cut than the Dynamo and the anti-gravity, it still has a much more centered, non-tapered feel compared to the Bird. The Bird had a lot more taper and was a lot more directional than this. When it comes to the camber, I didn't really get to lay this down on the table and give a perfect take on what's happening here, but it looks like it has that same unique camber profile from the Bird and the box knife, where there's a little bit of early rise after the C3, and it's not just a passive bend in the middle. I really like that profile because it gives you a little more float than most C3 boards out there, and it's a little more forgiving, but that passive bend in the middle gives it a lot more pop than you would think for that amount of camber. There's a mellow disruption in the side cut. It seems somewhat similar to the Bird. That's going to grip pretty well. If I were to guess, I'd say it's like the 0.25 magnet traction. There's 0.5 and full mag. It feels pretty good in hard snow, grips competently. I'd say if you're riding a lot of hard to icy snow, you can get more aggressive magnet traction, but this doesn't grab in softer snow. I've experienced the side cut a lot with other Mervin boards and it does a very good job. When it comes to flex, this has a pretty medium-ish flex. There's good pop to it. It was pretty easy to butter on the nose and the tail. I think overall it's a very good flex personality. When it comes to dealing with uneven terrain, boards that are this poppy can sometimes buck and bounce a little bit, but overall this is a very good all conditions ride. It handled hard, micro bumpy snow very well, and it's a very similar flex personality to almost all of Mervin boards at this flex rating. And I've tried a shit ton. It feels like it accentuates the wood core and gives you a good poppy feeling. It's not the dampest out there, but it can definitely handle all day, all conditions riding. When it comes to bass glide, this is one of the problems I've experienced over the years with Mervin boards, Lib-Tech and GNU. Their bass is durable. It doesn't have low lows, but it doesn't have high highs. It needs a lot of wax and a lot of maintenance to keep it at that high glide. So it's definitely below the industry average, but it is made here in the United States. They're the greenest board out there and they don't really try to look or act green. So that's a compromise you're gonna have to make if you want a Mervin board. When it comes to pointing it, this is pretty damp, comfortable. It's not the most straight line friendly board out there. You can do better, but for most people like me, average riders, you're gonna be fine with this. I didn't freak out when I picked up a decent amount of speed. Now, when it comes to the turning experience, this initiated a turn pretty quick, edge to edge. I think the old Bird was a bit faster. This feels a little bit more on the Dynamo side, not hard to initiate, but pretty predictable. When I got it on edge, I felt like it had that same typical springy turn to it. Yes, the Dynamo and the Antigravity, I think, had a little more camber pop out of it, just a touch, but overall, this was very satisfying. It felt turny, but not turny and slashy and a little bit on that surfy side of freeride that the Bird had. It felt a little bit more turny all mountain, if that makes sense. But if you like to turn like I do, and that's one of your priorities when you get a board, you're gonna have a good time with this. I didn't get any powder, but I've got the Dynamo and the Antigravity in some decent powder, and the Bird in a lot of powder, as well as the Split Bird. I can't say this for certain, but I think it'll give you a little bit more directional, easy float than the Antigravity and the Dynamo, but a good bit less than the BRD. This rode switch pretty well, and it had good pop on an ollie in a jump. So I think if you dabble occasionally in the park, this might be okay. Overall, I liked the new Lib-Rig. I think it's a fun board. I'd like to get more time on it, get to know it a little better than how I did at the demos. But I will say, I think if you're coming from the Bird perspective, you really like that tapered, directional, slashy ride with that little bit of early rise before the nose and tail, I don't know if you're gonna like the Lib-Rig as much. But if you're coming from the Dynamo and you want something a little more floaty and you want something a little more playful, a little bit more set back, then you might really like the Lib-Rig.